Hey, how's it going, everybody? Shaun here from Zoobox, and today we're going to be talking about Martin Scorsese's most recent movie, The Irishman from 2019, directed by Martin Scorsese, written by Steve Zalian, based on a book called I Paint Houses by Charles Brandt. It stars Robert De Niro, Al Pacino, Joe Pesci, Harvey Keitel, Ray Romano, Bobby Cannavale, Anna Paquin, Stephen Graham, Stephanie Kurtzuba, Jack Houston, Catherine Narducci, Jesse Plemons, and others. Plot synopsis is: an old man recalls his time painting houses for his friend Jimmy Hoffa through the 1950s to the 1970s. That's actually fucking hilarious. That's a hilarious one-liner there, IMDb. So, this would be the third time I think I've watched this movie all the way through. You know, it's a long movie. It's about 12 hours long. Not really. It's 3.5 hours. It's a long sit. But a kind of a quick one. What put the taste in my mouth to kind of do this was one of the more recent episodes of Zoobox Goes to the Movies. I'll link it at the end of this video. We talked about Scorsese's Casino. Dan Profit came on. We talked about Casino for like 2 hours. Casino is, I think, a really underrated movie, but it just put kind of Scorsese back in my purview. And I had watched Goodfellas not that long ago, revisiting Casino. And The Irishman, in a lot of ways, is kind of a trilogy, forms a trilogy with those movies. It's kind of a capper, you know, because you have Goodfellas, which is kind of like the low level microcosm of mafia. Then you have Casino, which is like the big Hollywood glitz glam version. And then you have The Irishman, which is kind of in the middle, right? Because it has like kind of this, it starts with these small stakes and these small towns and these small people and their small lives. And then it gets involved in like kind of politics. So it's like what the mob was doing with the workers' unions and whatnot with Jimmy Hoffa. So it's kind of, it splits the difference, and then it ends up kind of being a meditation on that kind of lifestyle. You know, Scorsese's always criticized, you know, since the 70s really, for like lionizing this type of behavior, because he just kind of shows it. He's not super judgmental about it. He just kind of lets the characters and their actions speak for themselves, and he's not trying to moralize to you, the audience. I think he trusts you to make your own decisions about it. He caught a lot of shit a few years ago for The Wolf of Wall Street because it seems like a celebration of hedonism. It seems like a celebration of assholes. But he's not really. You're just seeing it. You're just experiencing it. And if it makes you uncomfortable, that's just because of your own mores. And that's fine. That's kind of the point. You take away from it what you want to take away from it. You get to judge these characters based on your own values. Scorsese's not doing it for you. He doesn't do that work for you. And that I think that makes a lot of people kind of uncomfortable with some of his movies. And the cool thing about The Irishman is it feels like not an answer to those critics, right? But the natural kind of growth, the natural evolution of a person that is older. Now, they were trying to get this thing made for like 15 years. It took them a long time, not just to get the script together, get all the actors in place, but and then also they have this hurdle now with the technology because the actors got too old, so they had to do this de-aging stuff, which we'll talk about later. So it took them a long time to get this going. And in that time, they kind of, you know, they all got older. Scorsese made some movies. He made something like The Wolf of Wall Street, which is this observation, this meditation on hedonism in youth and indiscretion and being a monster piece of shit. That's like, you know, but they're all wrapped up in that. All wrapped up in that kind of that feeling of invincibility that you have when you're young. And I think like The Irishman definitely probably would be a different movie if Scorsese hadn't done some of that stuff. I think also his movie Silence about the Catholic missionaries in Japan definitely is in here as well, because this movie feels very meditative. It's about consequence. It's about getting older and having to live with the decisions that you've made. So we've never seen his characters kind of go to the full end, right? To the gamut. You know, at most you get these little things at the end of the movie, these little descriptions saying like, oh, Paulie died in jail. You have pneumonia or something like that, right? But you don't get to see it. You don't get to see it from a character's POV. And in this, with De Niro's character, with Frank Sheeran, he he's sitting in an old folks home, basically reflecting on his life and trying to make sense of why kind of everybody hates him to a certain degree. The final shot of this movie is one of my all-time favorite shots in any movie ever. It's De Niro sitting in his nursing home bedroom, kind of staring out the window. The nurse is coming in, she's about to leave. He says, "Hey, can you leave the door cracked? Like, I don't like it when it's closed. Like, can you leave the door cracked? Like, somebody might come." And then the camera just kind of slowly pulls back from the door through the crack, and you'll see him kind of look over, but nobody's there. Nobody is coming either. It's this kind of full circle nature of like this kind of a lifestyle, and the fact that he did things, he did things that he thought he was doing for the right reasons. He thought he was doing it to provide his family with something, but it's really just this kind of vicious amorality that he exists in. It was really just for himself. And everybody else in his life, his wife, his kids, they all recognize it, but he doesn't see it. Not until it's too late. It comes to a point where one of them won't even speak to him anymore. And, it took me a few times to really appreciate this movie. Like I said, this is my third time watching it. And I don't think I really, fell in love with it until this time. It is something that gets better and better every time I watch it. Like, I'm excited to watch it again in a year. Give it some time. Let it marinate. Let it sit there. But there are so many things going on, and there's so many layers to the movie and the characters, and that you can only really recognize in hindsight of having seen it before. That Scorsese is just seeding throughout the story. There's this deep sense of kind of regret and pathos, and the way the movie is paced is just so perfect to kind of reflect all of that. It's trying to hold on to the moment, like the character is trying to hold on to the moment. So there's these really long takes and these really, really long kind of slow moving scenes and lots of what feels like incidental dialogue, but it's really all just kind of enriching the entire experience. And it's just all over the movie. It's just, I don't know if I would say it's like Scorsese, I don't know if I would say it's his best or one of his best. I don't know. It's hard to judge Scorsese movies because he's always kind of willing to kind of do something different, to kind of go out on a limb with stuff. I mean, going all the way back from his early days, he follows up like Goodfellas with Age of Innocence. I mean, who the fuck would have saw that coming, right? What a wildly different movie that was than what he had done before, what he had done in the 70s and 80s with Taxi Driver, Raging Bull, King of Comedy, another one of my all-time favorite movies. It's The Joker, everybody. But I was so taken with it this time. One of the things that I do think is a detriment to the movie, and one of the only reasons I think I wish it had been made earlier, because like I said, I do think actually Scorsese being such an older man making it actually adds a lot of gravitas, a lot of weight to it. He was putting a lot into this movie because it feels like a farewell. It's kind of a very melancholy movie. And but the de-aging stuff, as well as it works as well as it can. I'll say that. That's about as big of a compliment as I can give it. It does stop. You stop noticing it after a while. You just kind of get involved in it. But there is something about the physicality of the actors that they cannot de-age the physicality. They move like old men the entire time, and it is distracting. That is distracting. I can't lie. And if there is something about the movie that totally would take me out, it is that. It is that aspect of it. But maybe it's just because it's so long, you just kind of forget about it at some point. You're just like, nah. You just stop noticing. You just kind of the drama is so good, you just get wrapped up in the drama. Scorsese, kind of in a weird defense of it, there is one of the things that actually made me rewatch the movies, because after when I watched Casino for the episode of Z-Box Goes to the Movies, and then even after that, I was just in the Scorsese mood, so I was just watching Scorsese interviews, and I just started watching interviews about the Irishman, and he talked about the de-aging effect in the same way that he was just like, well, this is kind of like just a new makeup. This is a new special effect makeup. This is like the, he cited the Elephant Man. He's like, well, that's still John Hurt in there. And it's just a tool. It's just something to facilitate something. People shouldn't be so weird about it, I guess. It shouldn't be such a big deal. And in some respects, I agree. But I would say the difference between like a practical makeup and a CGI thing is like you get to this like uncanny valley. Like it just reads wrong to the eye because we can accept that makeup has a certain look to it. It has a certain kind of tangible, but it's tangible. It has a certain reality to it. Whereas CGI, sometimes when it looks bad, it just looks unnatural in a way that isn't tangible. That's like the uncanny valley, they call it. And there's a few moments in here, especially with Pacino. Who actually, when I first watched this, I did not love Pacino's performance. But I would say by the third watch, I'm in it. I'm into it. I actually really liked it. He loses the thread a few times, I think. Kind of a confused old man. But at this point I really enjoyed it. And another person that I really enjoyed in this was Joe Pesci. Joe Pesci gives one of the more unique performances of his career. Something like he hasn't given a performance like this since like Raging Bull. It's like really understated and quiet. But in this movie, he's coming from this kind of position of ultimate authority. He's like one of the big bosses. Like you don't fuck with Pesci. You don't fuck with Russell Buffalino. You don't do it. It's not done. So he doesn't have to yell. He's that guy. He don't have to yell. He's got this calmness, this confidence that's like kind of intimidating and scary sometimes. There's a scene where Hoffa, Al Pacino, is kind of blowing up at Buffalino, and he just kind of stands there and just kind of like squints his eyes at him, and you're like, oh, see, that's like him saying, you're fucking dead. That's like the equivalent of him saying that. And Pesci does some great work. Not that I think everybody does great work in this. Another shout out, I would say Anna Paquin. She doesn't like have any lines in the movie, and but she's excellent. And they made this big brouhaha about the Bechdel test or whatever. Not literally the Bechdel test, but that kind of prism where they're like just measuring lines. They're like, well, if you only have 7 lines, that means you weren't important, which is not true. She's actually a hugely important character, and her performance is really great. Stephen Graham, another guy that I've known for a while, like a British actor. The first time I think I saw him was in Snatch. He plays Tommy in Snatch. That's probably the first time I saw him. And he's in this, and he's great. He plays. Who does he play? Anthony Provenzano, Tony Pro, and he gives a fucking killer performance. This is like a classic Scorsese character kind of performance, and he just goes for it, like goes balls to the wall with it, and it's a great thing to witness. What else can we talk about with The Irishman? There's so much to talk about. This is one actually I would love to just go like into a deep dive and dissect with somebody, and do actual like preparation and take notes and whatnot, because it's worthy of that. 100% it's worthy of that. But I do think it is a movie that you need to sit with for a while. I think you need to watch it a couple times. You got to put some work into The Irishman if you want to get something out of it, because the best stuff are things that you can only pick up on repeat viewing, in my opinion. And the last time I watched it, I put it on super late at night, thinking like, okay, I'm going to fall asleep to this. And I should have known better because I did the same thing with Casino like a week before. But I was like, okay, cool. I'll put on Irishman. Maybe I'll watch like half of it tonight, half of it when I wake up in the morning. I ended up just sitting there, and before I knew it, it was 4 in the fucking morning. And I had to wake up like 4 hours later. Yeah, long day after that, but worth it. Because I just didn't even realize. I just got so caught up in it. Just caught up in the performances, and it really moves really well. That's just something that Scorsese, I don't know, like with these longer form stories, like he's just really great at pacing them out and kind of building somewhat of an episodic structure to them, but not in a bad way, in a way that they don't feel disjointed. They just feel like I got to see what happens next. They're kind of all these kind of mini crescendos in the movie itself. And then you're just like, oh, fuck. the scene ends on a cliffhanger. I gotta see the next one. I gotta see how this resolves. And it's always doing that kind of stuff. And I really adored it this time. Like I said, an intensely melancholy film, really meditative on the concept of consequence and legacy and what you do with your life. And as a newer father, I think about this kind of stuff all the time. I think about like the choices I make and the things I do, and like how that's going to affect my family and how it's going to affect my son, right? What is my son going to think of me? Am I going to be worthy of his respect someday? Gives me pause a lot of times about the things that I want to do with my life, what I have done, what I have to answer for already, you know? And this movie kind of tells that kind of a story, but just on this kind of grander scale, right? It feels like a grand metaphor, a grand allegory. And it's done in a way that only Scorsese can do it. And I really do think it kind of takes the best parts of Goodfellas and Casino and kind of melds it together into something that is on its own wholly unique. But it feels definitely like a period on the sentence on the end of his kind of like his statement about these kinds of people, these kinds of men, and the things that drive them and motivate them. And it is cool to see, or not cool, but interesting and a little heartbreaking to see kind of the reality of it. Like the reality of it sets in. It de-romanticizes what these men do. If I would say anything, this movie does not make it look sexy or funny or anything. None of that stuff. It's all just kind of very matter of fact. The scenes really speak for themselves. He's not doing a lot of flashy stuff in this movie. And I think it really benefits from that because the tone of the movie does not warrant that. Because he wants you to kind of see it as matter of fact. Because when in a meta sense, when they talk about what it is they've done, it needs to register that way. The reality of it needs to register for you to understand where everybody ends up and why they end up that way. And it's a very moving film. I really, really enjoyed the revisit. Like I said, can't wait to revisit again in probably a year. It'll probably be one of those movies that's on my year rotation. Get it off of fucking Netflix, though. Holy shit. Netflix, they put a movie like this out, like The fucking Irishman, and then it gets buried in a week, and then you just completely forget that it exists. And it just blows my mind. I know that they're putting out a Criterion Collection version, and I don't, I'm not a person that runs and buys like every Criterion movie. I don't get like excited about it in that way. Although, Criterion's got some fantastic movies. I took advantage of some of the Criterion sale this year. And I'll probably, next time the sale comes around, I think this is supposed to come out sometime this year, the Criterion version of The Irishman. I'll pick it up because I'd like to own it in my collection and put it next to Casino and Goodfellas. And hopefully there'll be some cool supplements. Criterion sometimes is good about that stuff. Not always, but sometimes. And yeah, I think that's going to do it for my conversation with myself about The Irishman. Maybe someday down the line, I don't know, maybe it'll end up on a Zoobox Goes to the Movies because I think it's worthy of a full episode. I think it's worthy of discussion in a really in-depth, intense way where I get my thoughts really laid out. It was close to one of my favorite movies last year. It might have been my favorite. I don't remember. No. Something else was my favorite, but it was in my top 3. I think it was my number 2 favorite movie of last year. And yeah, worth checking out, everybody. So if you have not seen The Irishman, go watch The fucking Irishman. Go watch it. All right, everybody. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. If you'd like to know more about Zoobox, click the links in the description for Facebook, for Instagram, for my personal Twitter. Also, if you'd like to make a recommendation for one of these daily videos or something for Zoobox Goes to the Movies, the big show, leave it in the comments. I'll throw it on the list. All right, everybody, you have a wonderful one.